All right, we've got some breaking news from the United Kingdom and the royal family.
A bombshell leak from a closed-door meeting ahead of Wimbledon 2026 has sent shockwaves through the British media. King Charles has unexpectedly named James Alexander, the youngest son of Prince Edward, as Wimbledon's new youth ambassador. The decision is being described as a dramatic power shift inside the palace, thrusting a royal who has long remained largely out of the spotlight into the heart of one of the monarchy's most prestigious events. Sources say Camilla was left visibly rattled, realizing that Charles is no longer content with the old royal model and is quietly positioning the younger generation, starting with James, closer to the center of influence. Heated arguments behind closed doors quickly escalated into what insiders are calling the couple's most serious clash in months. Some palace staff reportedly said they had never seen Camilla react with such fury since Charles became king. Yet despite the intense pressure and fierce opposition, the king stood firm. Just weeks later, James made a surprise appearance at Wimbledon, displaying a calm and composed demeanor under the direct guidance of Prince William, instantly capturing global attention. The big question now is whether James Alexander is truly only a youth ambassador, or whether King Charles is secretly grooming him for a far more significant role in the future of the British monarchy. And does Camilla's unprecedented outburst signal that she has finally recognized she is losing control amid the wave of change Charles is determined to bring? King Charles III, bearing the heavy responsibility of preserving a thousand-year empire amid the whirlwind of a new era, sat in the chairman's seat. Yet his eyes still held a sharp intelligence mingled with a quiet, resolute thoughtfulness. Facing him was Queen Camilla, the woman who had stood by him through countless ups and downs, the very image of calm and silent power. At this moment, however, her eyebrows were slightly raised, revealing a barely concealed doubt. The meeting had begun by focusing only on the logistical details for the 2026 Wimbledon tournament, an event that was not merely the pinnacle of a world sport, but also an enduring cultural symbol of Britain. King Charles slowly turned the pages of the documents, his fingers pausing at a particular note. To him, Wimbledon was more than dramatic matches on lush, green grass. It was a stage on which to affirm the bond between the crown and the people. In a time when the monarchy desperately needed fresh vitality to escape outdated images, Charles understood that he required a bold move, a symbolic transition powerful enough to stir the public. Despite his advisors' expectations of a safe plan, King Charles unexpectedly announced that at this year's tournament, James, son of Prince Edward and Duchess Sophie, would officially take on the role of youth ambassador. It was an entirely new position created to connect young people with tennis, and more importantly, with the image of the royal family. James, who had long stood in the shadow of his more famous cousins, like William and Harry, was now being pushed to the forefront. The name James caused the air in the room to freeze. This 18-year-old had always been something of an enigma to the public. Unlike the outgoing nature of his sister Lady Louise, or the special attention given to William's 3 children, James had been carefully shielded by his parents in absolute privacy. Choosing a figure long considered on the periphery of public attention for such a prominent ambassadorial role at the world's most prestigious sporting event was a move no one had anticipated. Shock was evident on the faces of the council members, especially Camilla's. The Queen's gaze bored into her husband, searching for an explanation, or at least some sign of prior discussion, but she received only resolute silence. Charles observed everyone's reaction with an eerie calm. He recalled afternoons watching James at Bagshot Park, seeing the boy quietly practice his serves under the patient guidance of top coaches. The passion and composure in James's eyes were qualities Charles believed would touch the hearts of the public. The communications advisors exchanged discreet, worried glances. They feared that James, with his reserved nature and lack of experience before the cameras, would appear out of place amid Wimbledon's frenzy. Moreover, choosing James over more media-savvy names was seen as an unnecessary risk that could spark speculation about rifts or favoritism within the family. Queen Camilla clenched her hands tightly in her lap, her lips pressing into a thin line. The fact that Charles had made a structural change without consulting her, the steadfast pillar and his chief advisor, felt like a silent affront to her position. Camilla sensed that the control she had painstakingly built was being threatened by the king's somewhat sentimental ideas of reform. When the meeting ended, the atmosphere in the palace did not ease. Instead, it grew thicker with unease. The aides' footsteps quickly scattered in every direction, carrying news of an impending earthquake. Camilla did not leave immediately. She stood by the window gazing out at the vast courtyard, where guards changed shifts with military precision. In her mind, this announcement was not simply about a tennis ambassador. It was the opening shot in a restructuring where the younger generation was gradually being granted power, while the old rules she revered were being challenged. The Queen's displeasure went far beyond mere surprise. It was the fury of someone who believed she held the key to stability. She felt sidelined in a decision she considered unrealistic. The silence between Charles and Camilla in the hours that followed was like the quiet before a storm. King Charles remained seated at his desk, gazing at a family photograph taken at Balmoral Castle the previous year. In it, James stood at the far edge, yet wore a smile that was the very image of his father's when he was young. After the shocking announcement at the palace, a strictly disciplined yet discreet training atmosphere began to envelop the residence of the Prince of Wales. William, with the demeanor of a future king steadily maturing into his role, personally, took charge of guiding his young cousin. Beneath the ancient trees of Windsor, where the manicured lawns were tended with no less care than Centre Court at Wimbledon, two figures, one tall, one shorter, were frequently seen together from the first light of dawn. William taught James more than just posture and diplomatic protocol. He was imparting the art of remaining calm under pressure. Every step James took was meticulously observed. William adjusted the angle of his nods, the placement of his hands when seated in the royal box, and especially the way he kept his gaze forward, with confidence but without arrogance. James, dressed in perfectly tailored suits that sometimes felt suffocating, showed a surprising level of perseverance. He quietly absorbed every instruction, his hands occasionally trembling when facing imaginary cameras, only to regain control with an encouraging pat on the shoulder from his cousin. Deep within James, his passion for tennis burned as a small but steady flame. Rather than feeling forced, he saw the youth ambassador role as an opportunity to live his true interest. During breaks between etiquette training sessions, James would often stand alone on the practice court, swinging his racket through the air with a precision and power that even veteran bodyguards found astonishing. His eyes, when fixed on the fuzzy yellow ball, were no longer those of a shy boy, but carried the intense focus of someone who truly understood and revered the sport. This newfound confidence began to seep into his movements, making his steps before the media steadier and less awkward with the remnants of adolescence. However, in the shadowed corners of the palace, conflicting rumors continued to swirl. Veteran advisors who had devoted their lives to protecting conservative values gathered in small groups, whispering about the king's risky choice. They looked at James's still youthful face and worried that he lacked the necessary presence to represent an ancient institution. Confidential reports on public appeal were placed on William's desk with less than optimistic figures, suggesting James might be completely overshadowed by the glamour of world tennis stars or the sharpness of other royal family members. Amid these doubts, one late afternoon, when the sun had completely set behind the watchtowers, William shared a rare moment of candor with his cousin. He did not lecture. Instead, he gently revealed a secret the king had kept for many years. Charles had not made the decision impulsively. From James's appearances at small community events or remote match viewings, The king had quietly observed how the boy interacted with those around him, a genuine quality without pretense, a listening ability rare among young people. William told James that the king trusted the hidden essence in his quiet nature more than any fleeting brilliant spotlight. The revelation ran through James like an electric current. The feeling of having been watched for so long did not frighten him. Instead, it brought a strange sense of liberation. He realized that this new role was not an ill-fitting coat draped over his shoulders, but recognition of who he truly was. Responsibility was no longer dry rules to be memorized, but a mission he needed to fulfill to honor the trust of a monarch exhausted from worrying about his family's future. The British monarchy's need for change was no longer a slogan on paper. It was alive in every breath, every determined step of the chosen one named James. After the detailed information about James's role was officially formalized in internal documents, Queen Camilla could no longer maintain her usual composure. In the king's private study, the warm golden light failed to soften the sharp glares and decisive angry movements of the queen. Camilla stood facing King Charles, her hands gripping her crocodile skin handbag tightly, as if to hold back the storm inside her. For her, the stability of the royal family was built on a strict hierarchical order where direct heirs like William and later George must remain the sole focus of all attention. Charles's sudden elevation of James, a member of a secondary branch of the family, to represent a global event like Wimbledon, struck her as a dangerous disruption. She saw in it the seeds of power fragmentation and unwanted comparisons among the younger royals in the future. Her face flushed beneath perfectly applied powder, her lips pressed into a thin line that reflected an intensity of opposition she had never shown toward her husband's decisions before. King Charles sat behind his large oak desk, his face showing clear exhaustion, yet his eyes radiated an unshakable resolve. He quietly observed his wife's fury, feeling a deep wave of disappointment rise in his chest. Charles had hoped that Camilla, the woman who had endured decades of public criticism and coldness alongside him, would best understand his vision of a streamlined yet flexible monarchy. He wanted to build a strong, supporting team where figures like James could share the burden and bring a more approachable image to the institution. Camilla's resistance made him realize a bitter truth. Even in his closest family circle, his ideas for renewal were still viewed as misguided steps that threatened long-held traditions. The wordless yet turbulent argument played out through sharp gestures and piercing stares. She argued that giving James such a prominent role would lead the public to misunderstand the line of succession and overshadow the preparations they were making for George. Charles, for his part, responded only with patient silence, slowly gathering the Wimbledon files as a quiet affirmation that the decision had been made, and there would be no retreat. At the very peak of this emotional storm, a security breach occurred in the palace's protection system. A servant delivering evening tea paused abruptly outside the slightly ajar door. Through the narrow opening, the staff member witnessed not only the fragments of agreement, but also the sharp words spoken in the heat of the Queen's anger. The servant's trembling hands caused the silver tray to brush lightly against the door, producing a small sound enough to signal an impending media crisis. Within just a few hours, pieces of a royal war behind closed doors began leaking out, reaching the ears of royal correspondents. Rumors of internal rifts spread like oil on water. News outlets quickly began analyzing Camilla's discontent, framing it as a clash between rigid tradition and innovative change. The pressure from public opinion and the probing eyes of palace staff weighed heavily on King Charles. He felt he was standing at a crossroads. One path led to family harmony, the other to his duty of safeguarding the monarchy's survival in a turbulent era. Despite the heaviness in his heart from the quarrel with Camilla, he picked up his pen and signed the final plan for James at Wimbledon. His gaze drifted into the distance, toward the lights of the city still burning brightly, a symbol of the outside world's relentless motion. Charles understood that even if the price was peace within the palace walls, he would hold firm to his course. James would appear, and tradition would continue in a new form, even if it meant passing through the most painful fractures. The London sky on the opening day of Wimbledon 2026 was an impossibly clear, pure blue that made the deep purple hydrangea hedges and ivy-covered walls of the All England Lawn Tennis Club stand out in vivid contrast. James stepped out of the car, walking close beside Prince William. In a perfectly tailored navy suit, the young man appeared elegant yet remarkably composed, far removed from the shy demeanor he had once shown. James's steps across the grass toward the royal box carried an unusual calm. He made no effort to flash artificial bright smiles at the hundreds of cameras trained on him. Instead, he moved with natural poise, his eyes observing everything around him with genuine curiosity. William, ever the devoted mentor, placed a hand lightly on his cousin's shoulder, a silent gesture that conveyed steady reassurance. James felt the heat of the camera flashes and heard the murmur of the media, but his heart beat to the rhythm of excitement at watching his favorite sport from an entirely new vantage point. Yet behind the welcoming applause, a current of skepticism still simmered. In the commentators' area, the sharpest royal correspondents were typing non-stop, dissecting James's every smallest gesture. They called his appearance a product of a reputation polishing campaign, a desperate palace effort to project youthful energy and cover up the recently leaked internal rifts. Critical eyes scrutinized every wrinkle in his suit and every way he held the match program, ready to pounce on the slightest slip to prove he was not up to the responsibility. The unexpected turning point came as James and William passed the area for young players involved in the Wimbledon Foundation community program. Instead of offering a polite nod and continuing on, James stopped completely when he saw a group of children excitedly debating a serve. Ignoring strict protocol on distance, he stepped closer and crouched down to their eye level. In that moment, James's face lit up with pure joy. He used his hands to demonstrate a racket grip, his eyes sparkling as he shared techniques he had practiced on his own for so long. A video of that unscripted interaction, captured by a fan with no media advisors stepping in, was quickly posted online. In the clip, James was no distant royal figure. He was simply a young man passionate about tennis, passing on his enthusiasm to others who shared it. The footage exploded across social media. His sincerity and calm, warm expression shattered doubts about a carefully staged performance. The public saw in him a modern image. No grand speeches, needed only real connection from the heart. Seated in the highest part of the royal box, William discreetly watched the crowd's reaction. He saw warm smiles and heard cheers calling James's name instead of mere polite applause. A wave of pride and relief washed over the future king. He understood that James had passed the hardest test, the test of public trust. James was no longer merely Edward's son or Charles's grandson in the narrow sense. He had become a promising new representative, a bridge between the ancient crown and a dynamic new generation. James sat up straight, his eyes following the ball with deep knowledge and intense passion. He had no idea that somewhere in the palace, King Charles was watching the television with a satisfied smile while global opinion began to shift, celebrating a new symbol just born on Wimbledon's lush green grass. James had officially stepped out of the shadows, ready for a far greater journey. The heat from Wimbledon's grass courts quickly spilled beyond the boundaries of SW19, spreading across continents through the relentless flow of digital media. Images of James with his calm demeanor and genuine interactions with young sports enthusiasts became a cultural phenomenon within hours. On social media platforms from London to New York, from Sydney to Tokyo, discussions about the youth ambassador exploded. The public praised not only James's elegant appearance, but also expressed deep admiration for King Charles III's vision. The king, often seen as a guardian of conservative values, now appeared to the world as a visionary and empathetic monarch who had boldly handed the stage to the next generation, even as he faced his own declining health. This global support brought fresh vitality to the palace, yet it also deepened the existing internal fractures. Behind the ancient stone walls, a quiet ideological battle continued. Senior conservative members and a few of Queen Camilla's close advisors grew increasingly alarmed by James's sudden rise to fame. They feared that giving so much attention to a royal outside the direct line of succession would disrupt the traditional hierarchy. Secret meetings were held, and hastily drafted memos on image control aimed to restrain James's growing shine in order to protect the absolute prominence of the direct bloodline. Amid the storm of conflicting opinions, Prince William made a bold move that affirmed his position as the future leader. Instead of maintaining a safe silence, he chose to publicly demonstrate absolute support for his father's strategy. At a diplomatic reception held shortly afterward, he not only stood beside James, but also offered warm, respectful gestures while introducing his cousin to international guests. William understood that for the British monarchy to endure, it could no longer remain a closed fortress. He even quietly proposed an expanded plan in which George, Charlotte, and Louis would soon participate in age-appropriate community activities, learning to connect with the people through simple, everyday moments, just as James had done. The unity between the Prince of Wales and the King created a solid shield, protecting James from the critical eyes within his own family. James, though aware of the surrounding tension, maintained a steady composure. He neither grew arrogant from the praise, nor fearful of the criticism. He simply continued to fulfill his duties with intense focus, seeing it as the best way to honor his grandfather's trust. As for King Charles, sitting in his study at Windsor Castle and reviewing the positive reports on global public reaction, he felt as if a 1,000-pound weight had been lifted from his shoulders. His shoulders, once weighed down by age and illness, now seemed lighter. The wrinkles on his forehead softened as he watched images of James and William standing together, a symbol of unity and continuity. Charles knew he had been right to face the opposition and push through this reform. His plan was never just about a tennis tournament. It was about planting the first seeds for a future in which the British royal family truly lived in the heart of the modern age. Though differing opinions remained an inevitable part of monarchy, the alignment between Charles and William had opened a new chapter in history. The British royal family was gradually shedding its cold armor to embrace a warmer, more emotional presence, ready to enter an era where the younger generation would steer the ship of tradition across the vast ocean of the future. As the final cheers on center court gradually faded and the protective covers were laid over Wimbledon's grass, a truly new chapter began for James. No longer a faint name lingering in the background of his cousins, he stepped into the post-tournament days with a packed schedule of community engagements. He appeared at local tennis clubs in underprivileged areas where children had never dreamed of owning a proper racket. There, James shed his constricting suits for sporty, energetic attire and joined the teenagers directly in training sessions. James's transformation triggered a powerful wave of change within the palace's operational structure. Though arguments still lingered in the dimly lit corridors, the force of public support compelled the old machinery to begin moving to a new rhythm. The British royal family was no longer standing outside the current of the times. They were beginning to adapt proactively. The family's official social media accounts no longer posted only dry announcements or stiff portraits. Instead, they shared authentic footage of interactions, hard work, and inspiring everyday moments. The monarchy was gradually shedding its distant facade to embrace empathy, proving that tradition could only survive if it breathed the air of the present. King Charles, despite his steadily declining health, continued to quietly execute the next strategic steps from his desk. He did not rest on the success of James's triumph. In confidential files approved under late-night lamps, Charles began outlining specific public roles for the younger generation, George, Charlotte, and Louis. He understood he was racing against time to secure a solid foundation for his son William. The king spent many hours reviewing footage of James, noting public reactions to refine future plans. The fatigue on his face was now replaced by a strange serenity. He knew he had found the key to protecting the crown amid the storms of modernity. On late afternoons at Windsor, James was often seen strolling through the castle grounds, sometimes pausing to watch the Wales children at play. He understood that he was the pioneer, the one who had broken the ice of skepticism so that his younger relatives could walk an easier path. James's mindset had matured dramatically after that fateful summer. He no longer feared the rules or Queen Camilla's scrutinizing gaze, for he now realized that a royal's true value lay in service and connection, not in blind adherence to outdated doctrines. A calm confidence infused every gesture, turning James into a new pillar of emotional support for the entire family. The image of James standing on the tennis court racket in hand and pointed toward the setting sun became an enduring symbol of 2026. That photograph was not only hung in King Charles's study as a source of pride, but also graced magazine covers worldwide under headlines of continuity and hope. It represented a painless transition, a perfect fusion between a glorious past and a promising future. Under Charles's quiet guidance and James's natural radiance, the British royal family had found a way out of its prolonged crisis of reputation. At the informal closing ceremony of that summer, James stood beside King Charles and William on the palace balcony. A breeze from the River Thames blew in, carrying the breath of a new era, one where the young would guide tradition, where royalty would be redefined by sincerity, and where James Wessex would forever be remembered as the one who brought spring back to the world's oldest monarchy. After finishing the story, in your opinion, was King Charles's risky decision to place his trust in James a visionary historical step or merely a temporary media tactic to appease the public? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.